safer for everyone. So welcome everybody to the benefits workshop that we do kind of every year, just helping you understand benefits. What I want you to get first and foremost is that this is not a way for you to make your decisions on your rank order list. Every once in a while I get a student asking that, and I think you guys already all know that. This sometimes, though, can actually be a good tiebreaker if you're really juggling between 1 and 2 that you want to place in the same place on the list. You just take a look at the benefits and see who has the better benefits to then break that tie. But they never should be a be-all, end-all in making that decision. So let's jump into it. We're going to pretty much cover kind of the basics of insurance, health insurance, dental insurance, vision insurance, and what we're going to be looking at a lot during this presentation is what are the typical things you can expect from residencies? What are the most common? What other things are we looking at? Then we're going to jump into HSAs versus FSAs and when they're a good opportunity for you, when they might not be something you want to do. What does leave look like? So I know you're all starting to get interested in having more time off, even though every M4 I've ever talked to has had almost the whole year off, it seems. So what do leave policies look like wherever you're going? And then we'll look at some other benefits, and then we'll get into your questions to see what other questions you have. I will tell you all, one, of course, we're recording this. So we can post it out on the YouTube for those who, are on rotation and everything right now. Kiko, you want to mute that microphone? Oh, wait, I can do it. There we go. Anyhow, so we'll get to those questions and everything that you have later. And the other thing to tell you is that we'll be doing a shortened version of this during intensification. So now think of it as just kind of helping you, maybe if you've got that tiebreaker, but also helping you understand what you're going to be getting in your packets from the different residencies that you're going to get contracts from. And then when we actually come back during intensification, we'll go over some of this again briefly, but then we'll be able to get into some real questions based on your actual benefits being offered to you. So before we begin, why are we doing this? I've already mentioned it. It's to help you understand insurance benefits. It's to help you understand all the things that you're going to be offered while in residency. And from the financial standpoint, it's to encourage you to, really get to know what's offered and take full advantage of it. They don't pay you a whole ton of money in residency, so you may as well get all the other benefits they're offering you anyway. It's not bad money, but it's not an attending salary yet. We'll take about 45 minutes. And then we'll get the rest of the time for questions. Now, the big things coming up. March 16th, y'all mark this down. It's been in the newsletter, but, mark it down. At 3 p.m., we're going to have a mandatory session on financial planning where we bring in a speaker from outside. And he's going to be going over a whole bunch of different financial topics from taxes to retirement to, just how do you spend your money. Sorry. Declan, close my door, please. Please. Do you want to say hi? All right, come say hi. All right. Declan, say hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody.
Right there. Wave at him. All right. Uh-oh. Sorry about that, y'all. Every time he hears me talking in here, he wants to come in and say hi. Anyhow, so we have that session on March 16th. If you have anything going on with the match that week that you're actively involved in that day, if you are on active rotations that day, totally fine. We're going to be recording it. You can watch it later. I do highly recommend that if you can attend this one in person, that you do, because it's a good chance to ask a whole bunch of questions from the gentleman who comes and talks to us. And usually y'all's questions are the driving force of the whole presentation. Then we've got our exit counseling sessions. So be sure that you are signing up for those. Just go to any email I've ever sent you or go to the email I sent specifically on it. and sign up for exit counseling sessions. You actually cannot graduate without it. Since I'm the one that enters your final grade for IPM, we had them included in your syllabus that you must attend this session. And for those of you who, during your exit counseling sessions, I tell you we're going to be doing that PSLF is the best option for you. We're going to be doing a whole session that's really just a how-to. So how do you do this? When do you do that? We'll even get your phones and everything out and have you put dates in there for 10 years so that you never miss any dates or anything like that. All right, so that's all the housekeeping. And I've got the chat open so y'all can post questions there if you have them as we go, or just unmute yourself and catch my attention. So let's break down the basics. With pretty much any insurance, these are going to be the things that you really need to know how it works. Let me also tell you up front that there are one of two options for you to be as a doctor. You need to be either a complete expert in insurance and your patient's insurance, or you need to be purposefully ignorant of your patient's insurance. You don't want to be a doctor that comes in and you start explaining, yeah, this will be covered by insurance, and then they go and get the procedure and then it's not. On your case, though, so as actual people taking advantage of insurance, I want you to be as informed as possible. So, let's start with the definitions. Most of these you're probably already going to know. So your premium, this is your monthly payments. Now, you could get really lucky, and we'll look at the numbers on this in a minute. You could get really lucky in residency or in your attending job, and you have $0 monthly premiums. That would be amazing. There are some hospitals that'll even cover the entire family. It's rare, but it does happen. Then you have your deductible. And this is the one thing that a lot of people always forget. And when I get folks asking about insurance, they're like, I've got insurance. Why on earth am I being charged this month and this much? And we go, well, have you met your deductible yet? And the deductible is you have to fill out and pay this entire deductible before your insurance is going to cover anything. So if you've got a $4,000 deductible, well, guess what? You have to spend $4,000 on your health care every year before your insurance is going to pay a dime. If you've got a $100 deductible, that's a much better one. So you spend $100 and then your insurance starts picking it in. Then you have your copays. So the copay is kind of a reduced rate for getting to go and see the doctor. It's your cost for stepping in the door. You're still probably going to have some extra costs for any tests and things that are done. But your copay, it'll be on your insurance benefits like a $15 copay or a $25 copay, whatever that copay actually is. So, just be ready for that. Now, the copays generally will count towards your deductible. So you kind of get a reduced rate for going to the doctor's office at first. Then you've got your out-of-pocket maximum. And this maximum generally is going to be not including your deductible. So if you've got that, we'll call it $1,000 deductible, after you pay that $1,000, then you will still pay more once your insurance kicks in, but you'll pay, 20% of the cost of whatever your bill is. And then if that 20% ever totals, say, another $1,000, whatever your out-of-pocket max is, then after that out-of-pocket maximum, your insurance covers everything. Well, everything that they would normally cover. They'll start covering it 100% instead of 80%. Allowable charge. This is where you run into a lot. And I will say allowable charges are where you're going to run into issues more often with, say, your dental or your vision coverage. Occasionally with your regular medical care, but more often with dental and vision. And this is a negotiated rate that the insurance company has negotiated with a number of different healthcare providers. And they say, this is what this procedure should cost. And if they charge more than that, well, guess what? You're on the hook for anything over that, even if you're already past your deductible. Sometimes if you're already past your out-of-pocket maximum. Now, the good news is most healthcare providers, again, with the exception of dental and vision, they're going to reduce their rates down to the allowable charge. Not always. And then sometimes with dental and vision, you'll find that they'll do that as well. Then you've got co-insurance. So this is, your share after the deductible's met. And I mentioned that 20%, that's your co-insurance. So, provider covers 80, you cover 20, or you have 70/30, however you have that. Waiting period, how long is it going to take for your insurance to kick in? This is going to be a key thing for you all when it comes time for you to go into your residency. So, is there a waiting period? I will tell you that most residency programs don't have much of a waiting period, if any at all. But if they do, say your health insurance is going to kick in on August 1. Well, guess what? Your school insurance goes, if I remember right, all the way to July 31st. So you would be fine. If it doesn't kick in until September 1, or say you have a 6-month waiting period, we don't see that in healthcare very often, but other places like UPS is famous for having their 6-month waiting period on health insurance. Then you need to find some sort of a gap insurance to cover that time period while you're there. You can do that through the Affordable Care Act, or you can do that through some sort of a private supplier or search otherwise. Then we've got your riders. So you can always add on riders. You can always add on any sort of coverage you want, whether it's cancer coverage, whether it's for a specific illness. You can add on something to just fill the gaps in your other insurance, but it's going to cost you. Any rider you add on, any extra coverage you're going to get, they're going to charge you for. Makes sense. And then the big question, is it an HMO? Is it a PPO? HMOs are going to be kind of, you have to go where we tell you, or we're not paying a dime of it. You see this actually a lot with hospital systems, where they say, go to our practices, or we don't pay anything. And then you have the other option, which is a PPO, that is a preferred provider organization. And they say, okay, go where we tell you, we're going to pay a little bit more of it. We'll pay, your actually agreed upon coverage. If you don't go here, that's fine. We'll cover some of it, but we're not going to cover as much as we would if you went to one of our places, because we haven't negotiated contracts with these folks. So always best if you can to go where they say to go. But I can tell you that sometimes there are just no options. It's the same thing with those of us who work for the state on the dental health plan. Very few people actually are part of our dental coverage in the state. So we have to go somewhere else. And we still get coverage, and I was lucky enough to find one who writes off all the extra costs, even though he's not technically part of the plan, but you've got to be intentional in that. All right. That's the absolute basics. Now, you get into your actual contracts and everything, and your definitions of coverage and whatnot. There will be more things, but those are the big things. So, what are we seeing in trends? What can you expect? And hopefully, they've been giving you some information on this when you've been doing your interviews. But I do find that with the limited time they get with you, you're maybe not getting as much information as you used to when it comes down to this. So, what are we seeing? The biggest trend, the typical thing you're going to see is that your employer, your hospital system, is going to share the cost with you for your insurance. Like most places, they're going to pay generally the bulk of your healthcare coverage in terms of your cost of insurance, and then you're going to pay part of that as well. If you look over at Hopkins, this information's a couple years old. They only release the data on this every few years. But Johns Hopkins has, if I remember right, no monthly deductible or no monthly premium. So it's fully paid for the resident and their entire family. It's one of those rare ones. And then their deductible is only $100 per person, or up to $300 for the whole family. If you hit those, then all of a sudden, you're in the coinsurance and you're paying the rest. Then you get to the out-of-pocket maximum. So you will never pay more than $3,000 in a year for anyone's health coverage. If you do, if you get $3,000, boom, all of a sudden from there on, they're covering everything, or $9,000 for the whole family. MUSC is a little bit different. It is exactly like, it's the same insurance that we have working for the state here, because MUSC is state run. Theirs is a PPO, and it's cost shared, but not cost shared for your spouse. If you're a married student getting married, places like MUSC are only going to subsidize the insurance for the employee and if you have any kids. If you have a spouse, the assumption is that these days that spouses work, regardless of gender or anything like that. Spouses are working most of the time these days, and so they have their own health care coverage. They'll still cover them, but you're covering the full cost of your spouse's health care there. And you can see the premiums, you can see the deductibles and everything there. And then 80/20, after you hit that deductible, they're covering 80%, you're stuck with 20%. The benefit you get here with this one is because you're paying a monthly premium, they feel the need to give you a little bit of a lower out-of-pocket maximum. So, you'll never pay more than $2,200 a year per person, or $4,400 a year out-of-pocket max for the whole family. Vandy, very similar setup. You can take a look there. It's almost exactly the same. It's just not state run. And then, let's take a look at this. If you can find one of these places that covers everything like Hopkins, they're becoming more and more prevalent. But what we'll see is that most of the time it's only going to be for you that they're going to be covering everything. And then if they're going to cover you, maybe they'll also cover your kids. So resident and plus children is what we see down here. What they're always least likely to cover is the same thing we talked about with MUSC and Vandy as well, is that they're least likely to cover a spouse, because again, the assumption is that the spouse is a working spouse. If they're not, they're like, hey, you can still get coverage, but we're gonna only cover for you and for any kids. Now, the good news is, I mentioned most places are going to cover your health care starting on day one. So, July 1, your official start date, generally doesn't include orientation when they say day one. Almost 90% of residencies are going to give you insurance starting day one. So if you get sick on day one of work, you're still covered. And then again, most are going to have prescription coverage, which is good, kind of makes sense. And the added thing that we've seen a real major change on are these last two items. Just a few years ago, the last time they released the new data on this report, these numbers were much lower. They were down in the 80s and the low 80s when you're talking about substance abuse treatment. The numbers of insurers that are covering mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse are going up, and that coverage is also getting better. We know up front, you all know this up front, that medical school is stressful, and guess what? Residency can be stressful too. So, being able to take advantage of these at reduced rates, definitely things that you need to do, especially if we're dealing with substance abuse. I say this as the son of an addict, that if you find yourself in that, go get the help that you need. Highly, highly, highly recommend it. Take full advantage of it. So, it's something that can completely derail a medical career if you don't seek treatment. And I would hate to see that for anyone. Thankfully, I don't think that's a major issue that we've ever seen in our students, but it is prevalent enough in medicine that they feel the need to cover it. So keep that in mind. All right. So before we look at any other trends, we need to start thinking about how do we budget for our healthcare. And the first thing to me is always just make a spreadsheet. So if I'm comparing a lot of them, I'm going to make kind of the same spreadsheet with different tabs on each one. And I'm going to then look at this just very honestly. How often do I partake of medical care? How often do I go to the doctor's office? Do I have recurring appointments? So I need to be very honest about that and what that's probably going to cost me. I need to factor in my whole deductible, and then I need to factor in all those appointments as well as any tests that are regularly run for me, or your family if you've got family that you're going to be covering with insurance. Then I'm always going to add extra. So I'm going to be honest, go look at my normal, and I'm adding extra if I'm budgeting. And if I get to the end of the year and I haven't used those extras, great. I've got a little bit of savings. But we always take the normal and we add a little bit more. And then just run the numbers, and you need to look at this entirely honestly. If a place is offering you entirely free, we're covering your premiums, healthcare, that's great, but maybe I won't be able to afford their out-of-pocket maximum if something were to happen to me. Or, maybe I will. Maybe it's not too bad because, if they're covering everything, I can afford that $3,000. and so on and so forth. So you need to look at this just really honestly. Even see if you can go back and pull your data for the last few years, your budgets for the last few years, and how often have you actually used healthcare? And then we start looking at dental coverage. Where we're seeing more than 25% covering all of your healthcare, only about 25% of places are going to be covering your dental coverage. 71% they're going to offer you something of a plan, and 4% say, sorry, you're on your own. Dental coverage works works the same, and it works different, in that you get a few more restrictions with dental coverage, and it's generally I found harder to understand than normal healthcare coverage. So what do you need to look for? What is covered? So they may cover cavities, they may cover braces. Think about that if you all have kids or are planning kids. This is for after residency for most of you. Are you going to need to put someone in braces at some point? Well, do they cover it? And if they say they cover it, do they really cover it? Because I can tell you that the state health plan says they cover braces to an extent, but the coverage on that is slim and none. There's hardly any real coverage. So when you see what level, if I go to the dentist and they say, yeah, we cover 2 cleanings a year, but we only cover $25 for that cleaning. Well, that's not really covering it. I need to know that I've probably got at least another $75 that's going to come out of pocket for that. And then, same goes with, any cavities that you need to have filled and root canals and all that other good stuff. Best thing is, as y'all know, is just take good care of your teeth, because dental can be way more expensive sometimes than your other healthcare issues. Find out also what isn't covered. So, I go to a dentist who doesn't do the old mercury fillings anymore, but that's what's covered by my healthcare. So I need to find out if it's not covered, what's the difference? Do I need to go somewhere else for a filling or something like that? And then what are the premiums? And all really basic stuff. Is it included in my normal healthcare cost, like while you're on the student insurance, which admittedly I understand is not the best, or is it a separate charge, separate premium? And then some places will have secondary coverage. This is a good one to look again at MUSC and the way the state does it. So they have really basic coverage that'll cover you for like 2 visits a year up to a certain point. And then they have a secondary coverage called Dental Plus here at the state that you can get it if you end up matching at MUSC. And that is the one that actually really covers your dental. The other one, I don't know what it covers, but it never seems to pay out hardly a dime. The Dental Plus is what really covers you. So find out if it's worth having that extra coverage. Find out if it's not worth it. If you have great teeth, have always had great teeth, and their primary coverage covers your cleanings and basic fillings, you might not need anything extra. If kids are nowhere on the horizon, or if you have them in braces are nowhere on the horizon, well, who cares? For me though, with our kids, one trip to the dentist, the savings we have from having Dental Plus covers the entire year's worth of premiums, and that's just one of our visits. Then you need to ask, where can I go? This is especially important if you are going back to, say a hometown for residency. Can I go to the dentist I've always gone to if they're still practicing? And if I can, will it be covered? Otherwise, when you get to a new place and you're setting up coverage, the best thing to do is just ask fellow residents who are, have been there, they've been going to the dentist. Who do you go to? Who do you like? Use their information and find out if it's an HMO or a PPO. HMO, again, you go there and they'll pay for it. PPO, and if you go somewhere else, they won't. PPO, go there and we'll go where we say and we'll pay for it. Go somewhere else, we'll pay some of it. So do find out what that coverage is like. With the state, it's more of a PPO. And then your vision coverage. So, oddly enough, more places will cover vision coverage than cover dental coverage. I guess just because this is just cheaper coverage for most people. So it's an added perk that doesn't cost your employer a whole lot. That's the cynic in me coming out. And then again, most places are still going to offer a plan even if they don't cover it entirely for you. And then again, 3%, don't end up in these places that are 3% saying no coverage, 4% saying no coverage on dental, things like that. And it's going to look just the same as your dental. You know, some is going to be covered. You're still going to have some costs, and you need to know where you can go. And for the most part, your ophthalmologists and optometrists are going to know what insurance they take when it comes to vision insurance. There's only a few major carriers of that, unless your hospital self-insures for it. And then I will tell you, and you can see that down here, I've never gotten my free pair of glasses. They always promise a free pair of glasses, but every place that's selling their glasses knows that most insurance covers up to a certain point, and they price them over that so they can get a little bit extra money out of you. Again, I'm a bit cynical on this, so see if you can also find coupons. Like, I'm not endorsing the company, but right now LensCrafters has an extra $50 off of your glasses after your insurance coverage. So that's how last year I got these almost free. That, and I didn't buy the Oakleys or the Ray-Bans or whatever brand that you want. Find the cheaper ones. They look just as nice, in my opinion, or at least in my wife's opinion. She picked these out. All right. So what other kind of medical coverage? We talked about this already. We at least briefly mentioned this. So the behavioral health, substance abuse as well. But what does that actually look like? So this is where it kind of breaks down what you can expect. Most places are going to offer you, a little bit over 90% are going to offer you actual in-person or virtual short-term counseling. Some places, slightly over half are going to allow you same-day appointments, which is honestly a really good thing if a crisis comes up. But you can see all of these. Other places will give you just a brief assessment and refer you elsewhere. A large majority will do that. And then again, substance abuse, getting in there, help with parenting and childcare, because heaven knows our kids confound us all the time. Maybe you are caring for an elderly parent and they're offering some sort of an elder care option for a dependent, and an elderly parent can become a dependent or grandparent. And then, legal care. This can be important sometimes as well. Especially for those of you who are starting up families, this legal care can sometimes include coverage for things like getting a will in place. Very important, if you have a family. And then other financial consultation. We'll get to another one about financial consultation in a minute that shows it a little bit better. This one is specifically doing it as part of their EAP program, so it looks a lot more dismal than it actually is. Anyhow, keeps going. And very few places don't offer some sort of an employee assistance program. You can see it down there, 1%. Added bonus. Some of y'all, although not a big number, some of y'all will still get free gym membership. The rest are going to offer you some will offer a discount, and then some are saying tough luck. All right, HSAs and FSAs. By the way, I can stop now. Are there any questions thus far? It's all been pretty basic, I understand, but any questions so far? All right, seeing none. So a health savings account and a flex spending account. These are two separate things that are both defined by federal law on this. But basically, they work pretty similarly on the surface, in that they're ways to save money for specific purposes that is untaxed. So this is pre-tax money. So it's never taxed. It's taken out of your paycheck for you, and after that, they charge you your taxes. And it does reduce your tax liability. So what can you use them for? Basically, for the most part, you can use them for any allowable, and allowable is kind of a key word here, health expenses. Now, there are some other type of FSAs that are for childcare expenses. That's a whole nother talk. But you can use them for your copays. You can use them for your deductibles. So that's, a good thing. A lot of times, you might even be able to use them for your premiums if your premiums are charged separately, but normally that's also a pre-tax thing as well. You can use them for qualifying prescriptions. You can also use them for things that aren't prescriptions. Like a lot of times you can buy Tylenol, ibuprofen, all of those sorts of things. from using these accounts. And you can buy certain medical equipment with it. Not generally for you to practice medicine with, but anything that you might need, any sort of help, or I think back when we had kids and we needed the Billy blankets to get their jaundice down a little bit. All that sort of thing could have been covered by an FSA or an HSA. And so the way it's going to work is they're going to take the money straight out of your paycheck, and then you are actually going to pay whatever medical bills or deductibles and things out of pocket directly. Every once in a while, they will give you a card that you can use, but more often we see it as you just pay out of pocket, and then you have to submit for reimbursement. It's one of those things that always makes me have a little bit of caution, but if it's clearly delineated what is covered, you should have no issues ever. You're going to have to provide documentation like, hey, here's a copy of my bill. This is what we did. This is a copy of the prescription where I went and bought my Tylenol. Reimburse me for that. Whatever that is, you submit for reimbursement, and then they send you a check or direct deposit it, however they've got it set up. And there are differences. So, we've got the definition of deductible here, but there are differences in how they work. So a flex spending account is something that's offered, if your employer offers it, you can sign up for it. And a lot of employers will offer this. They have some smaller limits. You can see the limit on there. It's about $27.50. That's didn't increase from last year, even though a lot of people's healthcare costs went up a lot from last year. But here's the key thing with an FSA. It is entirely owned by your employer. If you have money that you did not use at the end of an FSA, at the end of a year in an FSA, they're going to keep it. You completely forfeit those leftover funds. There's no carryover. Now, they may be what they would consider generous, and some FSAs will give you an extra month to use the last year's money. I'm not, and they're not bad programs. It's just with an FSA, you need to be extremely, extremely intentional about exactly how much money you're putting in there. The neat thing about them is, with almost all of them, you are going to have early access to your funds. So if you commit to $100 a month, and starting in January, they kick this in, and an illness happens in January or February, you've committed to $1,200 for the year. And because of that, you have instant access to that full $1,200. Now, once you sign up for it, you can't change that amount, but you've committed to it, so you get early access to those funds. Even though you've only contributed, say you get sick in February, you've only contributed up to $200 to it. You've got the full $1,200. Again, it's, the funds are forfeit. They can't be invested by you. That said, your employer is probably investing them and probably making some money off of your FSA, even though you aren't making any money off of your FSA. I find these are really good when you have definite known expenses coming up. If you're expecting a child, if you have a chronic illness that you're managing, if you know you've got a surgery coming up, these are really, really, really good for those purposes in particular. I've used them in the past, mainly when we've known that we were going to be having a child in the next year. And it was a great way to protect that extra money from taxes and then, have it all in that account. The other option that you see sometimes is a health savings account. Now, with an HSA, there's a caveat on these. You have to have a plan that has a deductible of over $1,300. Now, that's a lot of them, and most of the ones we looked at already had that. But say you end up at Hopkins, where their deductible was, I think, only $300, then you wouldn't qualify for an HSA. But anywhere that you have a deductible over $1,300, you're going to be able to sign up for an HSA as long as it's offered. The limit on contributions on these are a little bit higher because they're mainly designed for people with high deductible plans. And so you can give up to $3,600 per person, with a max for a married couple being $7,200, or a whole family, however your family is. And this money is not owned by your employer. You actually own this money. You can invest it. You can contribute anything that you want throughout the year up to that $3,600 or $7,200 for a family. You don't set a number ahead of time, although most of the time we'll set it up as an auto draft from our paychecks and things like that. And at the end of the year, the good news is you get to keep the funds, and you get to invest them, and you can build this fund up year after year after year. A lot of people, especially once you reach higher incomes, which you guys will use this as some sort of a tax haven. So you'll invest it, it'll make some money for you. And when you get to the year 65 years old, at that point, you can take the money back out without any tax penalties. If you take money out early and it's not for anything medical, then you're going to be taxed on that plus another 20% penalty for taking money out early. It's good for a way of doing some extra savings. It's not a good way to do your main savings. That should be in some sort of other more liquid account with no tax penalties. So, which is better, and do you need it? You can see my opinion on here. It's really going to be highly dependable on you and your situation. I like them, and you can see them down here with the reasons, and we've already talked about them. Recurring prescription costs, especially really expensive ones. Starting or growing a family, great time to have one. Chronic illness, upcoming surgery, anything that you can plan for it's a great time to have a thing like an FSA. If you have some extra money that you don't know if you're going to need for healthcare, but you've already invested some in your retirement and things like that, an HSA is a good place to put that. And you can just use that as a healthcare savings account, which is what it's for. And then if nothing ever happens with it, you can keep growing that year after year. When you turn 65, you've got it plus all of its earnings entirely tax-free. So you're not taxed on it at the beginning, you're not taxed on it at the end. All right. Leave. This is the key thing to start looking for. You've been in school too long when the first question is, can I take a day off? There are two real ways of thinking about leave when you go places, and this is, a lot of people stop thinking about benefits when you stop thinking about insurance. But your leave that you get to take is a real benefit. Do they designate your sick time or your leave time? So, if you work for the state, if you work for a lot of employers, they're going to say you can take this amount of leave as sick leave. You can take this amount of leave as vacation time. Never will the two mix. The good news is that it does protect your vacations. It means that, if you have an illness that is ongoing, you can keep using that sick leave and you'll still have your vacation time separate. So it does kind of protect those vacations. There are also a lot of limits on this type of leave sometimes. I'll use an example from my past. And when, I have to take leave to help my family members out, I can only take up to 2 weeks of that leave. So that includes whenever we've had a child. I could only take 2 weeks off using that family sick leave. For myself, I have 6 months banked. If something were to happen to me, I can take the full 6 months entirely off for me to get better. And at that point, my benefits will have kicked in for long-term disability if I'm needing that. So, there are some limits on it. We'll look at some in just a second. The other mentality that employers take with leave is just completely undesignated. It's PTO. You hear that at Prisma Health. And it's just paid time off. They don't care where you are. They don't care why you're not there. You just need to, if you need PTO, you take your PTO. It can be vacation time that you schedule. It can be sick leave. Entirely doesn't matter. You get some increased flexibility here in that, you're going to not have to limit on what kind it is. Because again, if you're not there, they don't care why, just so long as, you're taking your leave. And you can just take it as long as you've got the approval from your employer, or again, if you're sick. The thing here is that you don't always protect your vacation. So downtime is extremely important. You all know this from a wellness standpoint. So, being out on sick leave is not downtime. So you want to hopefully be able to plan some of those vacations. And here's the questions you need to ask about your leave, because you won't get a whole lot of choice in this, but again, it may help you differentiate and when making your rank list. Again, tiebreaker situations, not main decision makers. So how does this leave accrue? Some places will give you your leave all up front. So from day one, you've got 2 weeks of vacation, 2 weeks of sick leave, 4 weeks of PTO, however they want to do it. And from day one, you have it all. Other places are going to have it to where you earn a certain amount per month or per year. And so as you work, you build up days and whatnot. The next question then is, does this roll over? Is it use it or lose it, or can I carry over? Um, I always like to use my examples of mistakes I've made for y'all so that you can learn from my mistakes, hopefully. In our case, working for the state, we can earn up to 60 days of vacation leave. And I think the sick leave is like 9 months that we can earn. I still haven't hit that one. But we can reach up to 60 days of vacation leave. But at the end of the year, they're not going to let you carry over all 60 days. They let you carry over 45 days. And last year is the first year this has ever happened. I lost vacation time because I forgot to take it. So you don't want to be in that situation. Now, other places, and this is a really neat thing that I almost wish we had access to, other places will allow you to cash in any days that you might lose, and they'll pay you extra for them because you didn't take it off. They didn't have to pay for someone to replace you. They're going to give you the money for it, which is great. Good way to get a bonus, or good way to cash in some days. And is there a cap on what you can earn? For the most part during residencies, you're not going to reach any caps, even if they allow rollovers. So just pay attention to that later in life. And some places, like I will say, get really specific. Y'all, this is what mine looks like when I go to report leave. They have, I've never even actually taken the time to count it. And it's actually no longer has 2 types of leave, which they had specifically for COVID, that the law terminated on those last year. But it even scrolls down if you look at it. They're going to be really, really, really specific on how you take your leave. And this is just for you to see and understand how specific places can get. So what's typical? What kind of leave are you going to get? Most hospital systems are going to give you total somewhere between 22 and more days of sick leave, with the vast majority being 29 and more. So somewhere around 30 days, not sick leave, of all leave together, so including sick leave. Some places will differentiate, other places will do PTO, so you can look at these other things. Some places will even, very rarely, give you actual personal days and things that you can take. And I will point out, sorry y'all, once you start residency, your years of getting your holidays free might be over, depending on what practice you go into. But at the very least, you'll finally get to take a vacation, so start budgeting for it. Now, we'll go back here. You won't necessarily get the choice dates, especially your intern year. So just do keep that in mind. And then for anyone thinking of starting a family, thinking of growing a family, you can see here that a lot of places are going to fully cover maternity leave, which is awesome. And then a growing number are actually paying for paternity leave. I mentioned that, with the state, I can take 2 weeks of sick leave. That's it. But a lot of places are allowing actual paternity leave and covering the full cost of that. Some places will cover part of your salary while you're gone on maternity leave or paternity leave or some other family leave. Maybe even if you're thinking of adopting and things like that, that would fall under the parental and family leave. So good options here. And what we're seeing is that more and more places are covering more and more. So what you see at the very beginning of your time in residency, by the time you finish residency, it may have changed completely and generally for the better in this field. All right, so what else? The biggest other thing I want everyone looking for when it comes to benefits is your retirement. This is while you are, ignore the April 15th date, I forgot to take that off. But while you are looking at these, while you are setting up your budgets and everything for residency, plan for retirement. The bad news is half of all residencies don't match anything. If you find yourself in that place, we'll be talking other options like a Roth IRA and whatnot when Sam comes up and talks to y'all in March, on March 16th, not April 15th. The good news is that the other half of places do offer some sort of a match, with the vast majorities being somewhere right around 3%. But oddly enough, you see another big jump right at 6%. For some reason, those just seem to be natural cutoffs for employers with offering a match. And match on retirement is free money. Just always remember that. A match is free money. You will do better taking a match from an employer than you will ever do putting your money specifically into a Roth IRA. The reason for that is you put $1 in, your employer puts $1 in. You already have 100% bonus on the money that you've put in. With the Roth IRA, you only get what it earns. Makes sense. Then you start looking at, so what is my pay? What are my scheduled raises going to be? When do they happen? More money, more problems. So you do need to plan for higher taxes. You need to plan for budgeting that money in. A lot of folks in residency will use that if they have a growing family. They'll plan that and use their money from a raise for that. They will put more into retirement. The possibilities are really endless. Just plan for that, and also maybe plan a vacation. Also, plan to go on conferences. Continuing education is extremely important in your residencies and beyond. And the good news is most hospital systems, and this is a big majority, are going to cover your leave time for conferences, and a lot of them will even pay for the conference themselves. If not everything, they'll pay for part of it. And then childcare. Is childcare covered? Is there any sort of benefit? For the most part, you're not going to see a fully paid coverage, but maybe you have something available like they do here at Prisma, where it's for hospital staff only, so you're able to get in there and you kind of get preference in getting into the system. That said, I've still heard people having issues trying to get in because the places do tend to get full. All right, then there's other benefits to look for. Do they offer financial counseling? This is where I said that it was better than that previous one, because this is outside of EAP. Most hospital systems are going to offer financial counseling, and that's going to be in the form of retirement. That's going to be in form of seminars. It may even be in the form of having a couple of financial planners on retainer so that the hospital pays their fees and you don't have to. That's a really great resource if you can find it. Sometimes they'll even have some experts on student loan repayment, which is also great to take advantage of. I will tell you up front, though, y'all are still my students after you graduate. So feel free to call me, email me, text me, whatever, after you graduate still. I'm still working with some of our students who graduated in our charter class, and helping them get out of their debt still, making sure things are going on. That's going on fine. Maybe a residency program pays for your moving expenses. Maybe they're still paying for meals. We saw a big shift at Prisma a few years ago where they used to give residents ostensibly a specific amount, but realistically they could go and get it re-upped. And it was basically unlimited money for while they were at the hospital to eat, which translated to an awful lot of Starbucks, I understand. But it also used to mean that students, the residents could take our students out to eat. We saw that change a few years ago, and hospitals started locking down on this sort of thing. Do they cover your scrubs, or do you have to pay for it? Prisma Health, pretty good about covering the scrubs, but you also don't get any choice in what you wear. Do they offer parking? Depending on where you match, this can be a big thing. You match in some cities, and guess what? You've got $300 a month parking on top of your rent. Hopefully that's not the case. If you end up in those cities, a lot of times they'll have some sort of a staff parking, but it's not always free parking. So do keep that in mind. And then find out what else they cover. They're going to cover any books you need, any computers, and all of these other things you can see on here. All right, questions. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can actually see y'all, or at least see who's asking the question. Where'd it go? There it is. So what questions do y'all have about benefits and things that you've seen on the interview trail, or things that you've seen with your families and whatnot? Y'all just being extremely quiet today?
Hey Casey, I'm here with Lindsay. We don't know the difference between a 401k and what's the other one?
A 403 something.
403 something.
Okay, gotcha. So a 401k versus like a 403b. I will tell you up front that they are exactly the same in terms of how they work, but a 401k is going to come from a private business, and a 403b is going to come from a nonprofit organization. So if your hospital is a for-profit hospital, they'll have a 401k if they offer anything. And if it's a nonprofit hospital, they'll have a 403b. If it's government run, like MUSC, it's going to be a 453b or something like that. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So if your spouse is on the same health insurance, is it cheaper to have both partners registered under one person and pay the spouse fee, or is it cheaper to both independently pay for your insurance? So to the person who asked that, you're basically saying, is it cheaper if you both happen to work at the same place to be covered on just one person's insurance, or is it cheaper to be covered, separate yourselves out? The answer is going to be, it depends on that. And the way to tell what the best option is, if you both are employed by the same place, a lot of times there's going to be a clause in the insurance that you both have to have separate. So that might even take the decision entirely out of your hands. For example, back when my wife worked for the school district and I worked for the state said I couldn't carry my wife's coverage because she was entitled to state insurance as well. So we both had to have our own separate coverage, which got really interesting when it came to dividing up how we put the kids on our coverage and whatnot. Other places, though, the question is going to be, if they give you the option, is there a subsidy on the spouse's insurance, on the spousal side of insurance, or do you only get the subsidy if you are covered under your own name? And in which case, if they don't give a subsidy on the spousal side, I'm probably keeping everything separate. The good thing is most deductibles are going to be the same, are simply going to be doubled for family. So, if you're on one versus on two, it's not really going to have a major effect. Now, when you start having kids, you probably want to put all the kids on one person's insurance, but that's another topic altogether. What other questions do we have? All right. Oh, wait. Can you use a spouse's insurance from a different employer if it's cheaper? Absolutely. Your employer will probably give you the option to deny insurance, and that happens sometimes. So if it's cheaper, do be cognizant of it. If it's cheaper, is it better? And how much you're going to actually need that insurance. If you're not much of a consumer of insurance, cheaper is entirely fine for you, probably, as long as you're making preparations for if something happens. So just be cognizant of that. Cheaper a lot of times means less coverage, which if you don't need is fine. If you do need it, you might want to go with the slightly more expensive insurance to have the coverage that you need. But no, you can entirely waive out of insurance at most employers. All right, what other questions? All right, how much should you plan on budgeting for health insurance with and without a spouse included? So when I'm making my budget, I'm going to include all the premiums for a year. So automatically I've got my 12 months of premiums built into the budget. Now, the good news, again, most employers are going to take that off pre-tax, so save you a little bit of taxes. But it's still built into my budget, so I know what it costs when I'm looking at my gross income and then figuring out what my net is. The next thing is where I'm going to take that realistic analysis of how often I am a consumer of healthcare and what that would cost me under my new plan. So if I'm a frequent flyer in the doctor's office, I'm going once a month, I'm going to budget at least 12 copays plus an extra couple of copays for those extra visits. So I'm going to do that. If I know that I'm got something that requires periodic testing, I'm going to factor that in every year. So the budget for each person is going to be individual, and it's going to also be highly dependent on where you match, because healthcare costs for the premiums can vary pretty vastly from $0 a month because they're paying everything up to, say, $300 a month for just you. Same thing with spouse. So same realistic budget that you're doing there, same realistic look at healthcare, how you've consumed healthcare in the past few years. Don't just look at 1 year, because if you have an illness or a surgery that was unexpected, that's not going to happen every year. But a 3-year average will generally give you a pretty good picture. And it's a matter of doing your best on it and understanding, just like with your normal budget, your healthcare budget, the first one's probably going to be total crap, but you're going to do the best you can. I recommend budgeting for a little bit more than you think you'll actually need, though. All right, what other questions? All right, we'll let it go another minute, but we are getting close to the end of our time. And if I see any more questions pop up, I'll certainly answer them. If you have them you want to ask me privately, you can email me, text me. I'll put my phone number in the chat. But thanks everyone for coming, and we'll see you at those end of year meetings.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.